As far back as I can remember, I've been a fan of the Joker. I can still remember 1989 when my grandfather took me to see Batman. I loved that movie, and I still do. I was already a Batman fan, and Michael Keaton did a great job as Bruce Wayne. But what really made the movie great for me was Jack Nicholson's portrayal of the Joker. He was cool and edgy, he was funny, but a total loose cannon maniac. I never thought another actor could ever possibly do what he did with that character. But then years later, along comes Heath Ledger. I could write pages and pages about how brilliant I think Ledger's Joker performance was. But we aren't here to talk about Batman '89 or The Dark Knight. We're here to talk about Joker from 2019, directed by Todd Phillips and starring Joaquin Phoenix. I wasn't really planning on reviewing this movie, or at least not today. So why did I make the decision? Well, I'm not really sure. I can say though that I like this movie a lot and got a random idea earlier to rewatch it. And then I remembered how much it resonated with me, and I instantly thought it would be a good idea to review it today. I'm still fairly new to film reviewing, and so far I mostly have reviewed horror films, although I enjoy all genres. I just love movies, you know? I wasn't really familiar with Todd Phillips, and I'll admit that after researching him, I had no faith. He had previously worked on the Hangover movies, and I didn't think he was the right guy to give us the Joker movie that we wanted. I was intrigued by the choice of casting Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker. He's a great actor, but my guess was that the writing and directing wouldn't do justice to the performance I felt that he could deliver. I've seen this movie 3 or 4 times now, and I feel like I can break it down well enough. Oh, but haven't hundreds, maybe thousands of people reviewed this already, and like 4 years ago? Yeah, probably. But the cool thing about art is that everyone puts their own unique stamp on things. Our experiences are ours and ours alone. Do you write reviews? If so, you are an artist, my friend. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise, and never give up. So, the movie starts out with Arthur Fleck, played by Joaquin Phoenix, putting on clown makeup and getting ready for work. He is a professional clown and does odd jobs wherever he can to try and make ends meet. The atmosphere is bleak right from the start. You can feel Arthur's pain within the first 90 seconds. Everything looks grimy, there's a sense of despair all around, and the film itself looks gritty and drab, perfectly suiting the tone of the film. So Arthur is holding a sign advertising for a store that is going out of business, where he is assaulted by a group of teenagers who steal the sign just for something to do. He chases them down an alley only to be knocked to the ground while the kids take turns kicking and punching him. The next scene shows Arthur meeting with a social worker, and it's at this point that you begin to learn about his mental condition. And you learn that he's on 7 different medications and has spent time in a mental health facility. He takes the bus to the pharmacy to pick up his medications, walking past mountains of trash bags piled up on the street before going home to his apartment, where he takes care of his mom, who also very obviously struggles with mental illness. You can tell that Joaquin Phoenix took the role seriously. He looked pale and gaunt, probably at least 30 pounds lighter than normal. I love when an actor shows this kind of dedication. Arthur spends his free time going to see stand-up comedy while he is working on his own material in hopes that he can become a stand-up comedian himself. He doesn't really understand comedy. He laughs at the parts of the jokes that aren't supposed to be funny, and his own jokes are sadly just ramblings of someone with severe mental illness. I really liked this part, and for those that don't read comic books, this aspect was taken from the now famous Killing Joke graphic novel, which I highly recommend. That's the only similarity, but I still thought it was really fucking cool. The next day, Arthur loses his job, and this is what pushes him over the edge. On his subway ride home, he is assaulted by 3 entitled pricks, which he ends up killing with a pistol given to him by a coworker. He is terrified, but once he calms down, he realizes what it's like to finally be in charge. In ways, he is reborn. In case you haven't seen this movie yet, I'm going to stop here. In case you were wondering, it's around the 38-minute mark and it's a 2-hour movie. Yeah, it's pretty dense, really, but not in a bad way at all. In fact, I like most of this movie quite a bit, but there's some filler moments here that I would change or just would have left out entirely. Mostly the parts that show that Arthur is delusional. I mean, it's no surprise, and it's not that I don't think that Arthur shouldn't be delusional, considering his mental state. It's the way that it was shown, with some unnecessary twists that were, in my opinion, rather pointless. Things continue to get worse for Arthur as he continues to push back on society, and he even decides to dig up things about his childhood, which causes him to slip even further into a violent rage. The last act of this movie is probably the most effective. It is visceral, intense, almost anticlimactic. The Joker has an R rating, but that won't prepare you for the whirlwind of violent vengeance. Now, I haven't exactly kept my struggle with mental illness a secret. It's part of who I am, and I'm not ashamed of it. I don't have the same struggles Arthur does, but I also haven't ever met anyone quite like myself. And for that reason, I sympathize with Arthur. People are capable of committing horrific acts, but nobody wants to talk about the reasons they were committed, why people do things that they do. When this came out in 2019, a lot of people only reacted to the violence and made statements about how it would influence people to act out violently themselves instead of focusing on what it's really about, which is mental health and classism. As I've said, this isn't a perfect film, but there's a lot here to like. Overall, it's intense and powerful, if just a little flawed. It's also not entirely original because I can draw more than a few parallels to Taxi Driver, the Robert De Niro classic from 1976. The character of Arthur Fleck was no doubt influenced by De Niro's Travis Bickle performance. That said, the Joker gets a pretty high recommendation from me, and as far as a score, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I wanted to give it a 10, but as I said, there's a few scenes I didn't really care for. Other than that, the last act gets an easy 10, and it's worth watching for that alone.